Hi, I'm Caio from Atelier RPG, and today I'd like to show you how I sculpted and painted a monster for D&D, all from scratch. Let's start by the reference drawing that I made myself to help guide me through the process of sculpting. Pretty cute, huh? First, I made an armature with steel wire and aluminum foil. Nothing too complex, just the basic shapes and the dozen legs. And now the epoxy work starts. Mix equal parts white and gray and work them thoroughly. You can use water to avoid epoxy sticking to your hand and your tools. No specialized materials needed, just water will do. In this first pass, all I'll do is cover the main body with epoxy and lock the legs into place. Once it's solid, in about 2 hours, we can keep adding to the main structure of the monster. I shaped and added a sheet-like piece of epoxy to the underside of the lower jaw. That will make it easier to add new components later. I do the same to the upper jaw and start adding volume to the tail. Here, I'm setting aside several different volumes of epoxy. These will become the extremities of its legs. I cut some wire to stick the leg extremities while I shape them. After they're done, I stick the wire in putty for the epoxy to cure. To add some texture, I carved out the legs with a box cutter. I did it both to save on sanding time and to make painting a little easier later. Once one of them is finished, I glue them to the leg wiring and move on to the next. And this is how it looks, with all of the leg extremities in place. On this pass, I covered all the exposed aluminum foil that was left, and I also started adding height to the lower jaw. I add more volume to the upper jaw and then I smoothed it to the existing base. As soon as the previous layer cured, I added the fangs to the lower jaw. All of them are placed one by one and I make sure that they are all different sizes, so it won't look uniform. Now I'll put on some volume on the midsection of the legs, making sure to have a break in the middle, so it looks like an articulation. I did it for all 12 legs. I'm going to use these little metal balls as the eyes for my monster, and to define their final position, I'm gonna place down some little balls of epoxy. Those will stabilize them and also glue them in place once they're dry. Oh, look at him! What a cute little buddy! Once the eyes and the legs have formed up, I make another pass of epoxy, trying to correct any imperfections I see, trying to make it as smooth as I can. Here, I'm sculpting the skin that stretches when the monster opens its jaws. It's always good to have a tool at hand to support what you're doing when there are few points of contact. The monster's eyelids were placed in 2 steps. First, I made the bottom eyelids and then the upper eyelids. Here's the process in more detail. Now, let's make the texture on the back. The way I see it, the structures on the back are keratinous and made of the same material as the extremities of the legs. So, those are going to be his natural armor. The whole process of texturing the back was made with a simple pen. And there's the question of why did I use singular balls of epoxy? Well, that's so I could have more control over the topography on the back. That meaning, if I wanted a place higher or lower than the other, it was simpler to control. After the carapace had dried, I applied fangs to the upper jaw, the same way I did with the lower one. Here, I'm going to sand down the whole skin of the body, try to get rid of fingerprints and bumps, try to make it as smooth and natural as possible. As a final detail, I'm gonna add these little underdeveloped claws as to make it just that little bit more unnerving. I'll use a little ball of putty to stick the monster to the unfinished base. That will make it a lot easier to paint. I'll use black primer as always, and I diluted it with a little water. Now let's start with the main color. I chose deep red as a base, and I'm gonna cover all of the areas of skin of the monster. I used ivory for the carapace, and also for the leg extremities. Always remember to use 2 thin coats. And over the ivory I used Reichland Flash Shade, but just about any reddish brown wash should do. Trying out the positioning again, now with everything glued down. On the tip of the monster's claws, I did a dry brush of dark brown, just to make the color variation a little more interesting. And for the highest part of the carapace, a dry brush with the original ivory. And also on the uppermost parts of the claws. I mixed the deep red with a medium gray, and then I applied on all the highest parts of the monster's skin. Right after that, I mixed the deep red with a light gray and focused the highlights on the centermost areas of the previous ones. And to finish the skin, I diluted the deep red in water and applied it over all of the skin. I think it was a very easy technique that gave me a very good result in the end. With the skin finished, the legs were painted deep blue and the eyes were painted black. Like on the body, I mixed the deep blue with a medium gray and used it for a highlight. I did the application of paint in a hatching motion to give some texture to the legs. Now I'll mix the deep blue to a light gray and I'll highlight just the highest points of the legs, also in a hatching motion. And finally, the base. First, I test the mini with some elements added, and I'll switch them around until it looks natural. Detailed enough, but without stealing the show. Now, I'll glue them down. Also, for a good cave sand texture, I use super glue and baking soda. It glues down instantly, and it makes for a very fine texture. I tested the positioning once more, now with everything glued down. I went ahead and primed it all black, and when I did, I felt like it was missing something, some details. So I'll glue down some small rocks, and obviously what was missing? Skulls. I primed it all black again. So let's start really painting it. Black by itself is very monotonous as a base color, so I applied and mixed all of the dark colors that I had on the base. The final result is gonna look a little dark, but that's exactly what we want. And right after that, I'm gonna do a very heavy dry brush of medium gray over all of the base. That's gonna really blend all of the tones. and over that medium gray goes a light gray, lighter dry brush. And that's gonna finish the stones and the sand. To finish the base, I painted the skulls with ivory, and then I washed them with the same wash that was used on the monster's carapace. As a final touch, I painted over the artificial eye shines I had done earlier, and then I applied a shiny varnish over them. I think it looks a lot more natural like that. And here's the final result. And that's it! His name is the Deep Snapper, and it inhabits dark caves. Take a look at his stat block for D&D 5.0 in the description below, and please tell me what you think of this kind of project. Subscribe to not miss any new videos, leave a like if you liked, and friends, as always, good games.